Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio, where we bring you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the unvarnished truth. Don't hesitate to present it to you in a way that is unwavering and unapologetic. We are never, ever, ever going to give in or back down from the truth of the Word of God. And here to help us sort through some of this is Peter LaBarbera, one of my personal heroes. Peter, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Well, thanks, Brian. Right back at you.
And tell us, Peter, just before we jump into the conversation, tell us who you're with and how people can get more information about you and your organization.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, the organization is Americans for Truth about homosexuality. We try to report truth and facts that the media are ignoring about this politically correct issue. And our website is AmericansForTruth, all written out, .org.
So Peter LaBarbera is our guest. And Peter, the reason I brought you on is I saw a little post that you did yesterday on LifeSite News that just jumped out at me. And I'm going to have you walk us through some of the details. Now, this information, I want to set this up by making sure our listening audience knows that the information that we're about to talk about together, that he's going to bring to you, is information that comes from the Centers for Disease Control. This is not coming from Americans for the Truth About Homosexuality, Peter's group. It's not coming from our group, the American Family Association. It's not coming from the Family Research Council. This is coming from a government agency, a federal government agency, the Centers for Disease Control. And Peter, I knew that I'm familiar with the CDC research. I've often used it in interviews and articles I've written and so forth, but I had no idea of the problems that our culture right now has with young boys that are ages 13 to 24 and the problem with HIV transmission. So tell us what the CDC is telling us.
Yeah, Brian, I'm right with you. When I saw this thing, I couldn't believe it. I'd already seen one CDC paper which said that it was over 90% of the HIV cases for males ages 13, so that's a teenage boy, to 24 was over 90%. But then I came upon this slide from the CDC, which I think this is based on 2011 data, Brian, and here's what it found. Ages 13 to 19, 95% of the cases of males ages 13 to 19 with HIV, 95% are linked to homosexual sex. For ages 20 to 24, it's 94. So one wonders why on earth are these politically correct elites confirming young men in homosexuality when there's this incredible risk associated with this behavior?
Well, and I want to have you comment on this, Peter. I want to get back to some of the details there, but we're always told by gay activists the lie that this is not a gay disease. You got as much transmission in the heterosexual community as you do in the gay community. They're trying to get away from the link between homosexual conduct and the transmission of HIV. Now, we do know that it can be transmitted through heterosexual contact. We do know that it can be can be transmitted through injection drug abuse, sharing dirty needles and all that. That's the second highest risk behavior for HIV. But this is astonishing to me, Peter, that even the CDC is admitting that of the young males between 13 and 24, and this just breaks my heart when I think about it, because these are young boys that have their entire lives ahead of them. These are the guys that ought to be thinking about marrying, about starting a family, about building a life with a wife and children. And yet the number one risk factor of those that have HIV, the ones that are diagnosed with HIV, is that they got it, 94 to 95% of them, by having sex with other males. And that kind of explodes the myth that this is really a heterosexual disease. It seems to be predominantly a gay disease, a homosexual disease.
Yes, and that's why, Brian, you have had some gay activists recently in the last few years coming right out and saying HIV is a gay disease. And they've caught some flack from other homosexual activists for saying this. But you're absolutely right. And one thing that I had never really thought about, Brian, was on this, the gay activists get mad when we say, hey, the government prevents or this discourages smoking among youth. Why is the government promoting harmful homosexual activity? But then you think about it. Smoking is a long-term risk. But here you have boys in their teenage years coming down with HIV, which leads to AIDS, and that behavior, homosexual sex, cited 94 to 95% of the cases for young men ages 13 to 24, is being promoted not just by the government, by teaching, education establishment, as we know, by Hollywood and the media. Everybody is promoting this lifestyle, and they do it in the name of compassion. And I would say that if you're truly compassionate, you would not confirm a young man in homosexuality knowing these incredible health risks that are out there.
In fact, what we see, and you talk about this in your piece, Peter, then you would think that the logical thing for the Centers for Disease Control to do is to do what they've done with smoking. Look, we know there are health risks associated with this behavior. We are going to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to discourage teenagers from taking up smoking because it can give you cancer, it can shorten your lifespan. So you would think if the CDC was making these decisions logically and rationally, that's what they would do with homosexual behavior. They would be warning teenage boys, look, this can kill you. It can give you diseases. It can shorten your lifespan. But instead, you point out that they're actually funding groups that support and promote homosexual behavior among teenagers.
Absolutely. The very opposite of what they should be doing, which is saying don't engage in high-risk homosexual sex. They're doing the opposite. They're giving money to groups like GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. This is radically pro-gay organization that promotes homosexuality, bisexuality, and even gender confusion, transgenderism in schools. They're also giving money to the GSA Network, which is the Gay Straight Alliance Network. This is an organization which sets up, pushes these homosexual clubs called GSAs in schools. So here's the CDC, knowing that the extreme health risks, especially associated with male homosexual behavior, and they're promoting a pro-homosexual mindset. I mean, the political correctness of this organization is unbelievable. It's like they're denying their own reality. They're disconnected from the very facts that they're bringing to the public.
Well, that's really, as you point out, Peter, it's not compassion. This is not your word, it's mine. It's cruelty toward teenage males. It's not compassionate. You could be consigning these young males to a short lifespan and to a disease-ridden and lonely lifespan. So it's not compassion, it is cruelty. And you point out, Peter, another finding from the CDC. We talk about the pathologies that are associated with homosexual behavior, which is why it shouldn't be normalized, it shouldn't be legalized, it shouldn't have special protections in law, that the male-to-male sexual behavior is not the only risk that is connected to homosexual behavior. It's not just HIV, but there are other risk behaviors associated with this among teenage boys.
Yes, absolutely. And don't forget, Brian, that when we say heterosexual transmission on the female side, a lot of times that's really it's misleading because females, especially African-American women, are coming down with HIV because they've had sex with a man who's on the down low, who's secretly engaged in perversion, usually homosexuality. And this is common in the black community. And so even females who contract HIV supposedly heterosexually, there is a homosexual connection there.
And the CDC talks about some of the other high-risk behaviors that young men engage in, not just sex with one other male, but there are other high-risk behaviors that they're more likely to engage in.
Yes, and I could just read right from the sheet if you want, Brian.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yes, I mean, you did a great column on this. It's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey found that they're analyzing these young men with these young homosexuals. They found that sexual minority students, that's a politically correct term for homosexuals, especially those identified as homosexual or bisexual, were disproportionately likely to engage in many health risk behaviors, including sexual risk behaviors such as having sexual intercourse for the first time at younger ages, having multiple sex partners, not using condoms, tobacco use, alcohol, and other drug use, and behaviors related to attempted suicide. And so we know that this lifestyle is extremely risky, and yet all the liberal elites and even some conservatives now are going along with this idea that there is such a thing as a gay youth, and you must affirm that young person in homosexuality. And I agree with you. This is not a compassionate thing to do. It's cruel to confirm somebody in a lifestyle which is high risk.
And one of the things that raises questions in my mind, Peter, about what the Boy Scouts have done. I mean, the Boy Scouts think that they're protecting boys under their care by saying we're not going to have homosexual scout leaders. But what the CDC is talking about is the transmission of AIDS to boys that are between the ages of 13 and 19. And we know they've got an increased risk of engaging in sex at earlier ages. I mean, there isn't any reason that I can think of why you couldn't have transmission from one teenage male to another teenage male, and the Boy Scouts seem to be oblivious to this.
Absolutely. And John Stenberger, who founded the new alternative organization, Trail Life USA, told me in an interview that a high-ranking Boy Scout official admitted to him that boy-on-boy sexual contacts will increase under the new pro-homosexual policy at the Boy Scouts. So they know, and of course also, Brian, let's be honest here. We know it's only a matter of time before the Boy Scouts allow openly homosexual adults. So you're going to have the adult risk of pedophilia. Who wants their son going out in a tent with an openly homosexual man overnight? And then you've also got the boy-on-boy. And I think we haven't focused enough on this boy-on-boy health risk. I think this is a common thing, especially if you have an older teenager who can exert influence over a more impressionable, naive, younger teenager. I think this is something that's very dangerous.
Let me ask a quick question, Peter. Would you be able to stay over for a couple of minutes and extend our conversation? Do you have time to do that?
Oh, sure.
Okay, I want to talk
Absolutely.
to you about what Fox Sports did to Craig James, and want to talk to you about what's going on in San Antonio. So maybe we can take about a half of the next segment to talk about those things. But back to the Boy Scouts just for a second. I've got another story, and this comes from my hometown of Boise, Idaho, where 4 more men have joined an Idaho lawsuit filed in federal court against the Boy Scouts of America. All 8 involved in the suit say they were sexually abused by scoutmasters, and that leaders in both the LDS Church and the Scouts failed to protect them. And the way I see it going, Peter, and I'll give you just 15 seconds, but the way you get an 18-year-old Scout graduates, he wants to be a Scout leader. As an adult, Scouts say no, he sues them for discrimination. Bingo, he's in as a Scout leader.
Absolutely. That's going to happen, and it's only a matter of time.
Our guest is Peter LaBarbera with the Americans for Truth about homosexuality. We'll be back to talk with him about Fox Sports firing Craig James because he believes what you and I believe about marriage. That's now become a fireable offense in corporate America to believe in natural marriage. And we'll talk about what's going on in San Antonio, making it illegal for Christians to serve in public office. Back in 2. Stay with us. Focal Point AFR Talk.